Alright, today I'm working on changing out the track bar on my Jeep. It's currently got a JKS adjustable track bar on there. And I've had this on there for a year or two now, and I've run into a couple of issues with it that don't seem resolvable with my current suspension setup. So I just now unbolted it, so let me show you what the problem is. Unbolted it from the frame here and dropped down. So this has a flex joint in the track bar. This piece right here has a joint that swivels around to allow for articulation. And this flex joint is fairly large, and you don't have a lot of clearance between this coil spring mount on the bottom, on the axle side of the coil spring, and the front diff housing. And the problem that I keep having with this is that the track bar, no matter how I try to center the axle, it either runs into this coil spring mount or it runs into the front differential, and it leaves marks on that diff housing. And this is only a Dana 30 front axle too, so if you have a Dana 44, this would be an even bigger problem. The only way I can see you could resolve this would be if you increase your bump stop spacer, and I'm already running a 3-inch bump stop extension on the front, and I've got the suspension set up just how I want it. I don't want to add any more length to that bump stop. So the only way to deal with this problem is a different track bar with a different type joint. This flex joint is worn out twice on me now, and I don't know if it's just from normal wear and tear or if it's because it's hitting on stuff and that's causing it to bind up and that's wearing the joint out. But I've gone through 2 of those flex joints in a matter of about 3 months. They're only like $9 or $10 to buy those flex joints to rebuild those track bars, but it's a pain in the butt to do, to have to take the track bar off every 2 months and rebuild it. So I decided to try out different style track bar. This is made by Metalcloak, and it has a Heim joint on the end, and it's a much smaller size joint than that flex joint, so I'll have a lot more clearance between that coil spring mount and the front differential. So once I get this bolted in place, I can show you the difference in clearance that it'll have. Okay, here are the 2 track bars side by side before I put the new one in. The JKS one that I just took out is here, and this is the one made by Metalcloak here. And when you look at them side by side, you can see the massive difference in size between this flex joint on the JKS bar versus the Heim joint on the Metalcloak one. Here's bushings, pieces from inside of the flex joint. I just rebuilt this about 2 or 3 months ago. So these are these 2 plastic pieces that are inside of that flex joint. They're held in by a washer and a big snap ring. So if you want to take it apart and rebuild it, you got to get that snap ring out, the washer out, and the whole thing's under tension, so you have to kind of squeeze it with a socket a little bit and get that snap ring out and pull it apart. It's a little bit of a pain to do, but you can get it done. It's just not something you would want to do every 2 months. But what has happened is these new pieces that I put in here, they've already got some wear on them, and so when this was mounted on the Jeep, when you're turning the wheel back and forth, you could see movement between this bolt and the outer part of the track bar. So the track bar is actually shifting left and right slightly, so I know there's play in that joint. It needs to be rebuilt again. So it kind of causes a wandery feeling when you're driving down the road, and it's just super frustrating because I just did it a couple months ago. I'll show you the spots where it was hitting. Alright, for starters, right here, this hole, this used to have a grease nipple in it. The grease nipple is broken off. It's the 2nd or 3rd time that's happened because that grease nipple is oriented in a way that puts it right next to this lower spring mount. So when you adjust the track bar to center the axle under your Jeep, that joint is so close to here that that grease nipple actually ended up hitting on here when I compressed the suspension all the way, and it broke it off. So I put a new one on, and I readjusted the track bar, and I actually offset the axle slightly towards the driver's side on purpose to allow clearance for that grease nipple. But somehow, after several trail outings, it still managed to hit that grease nipple and break it off. The other spot where it was hitting is right, let me get my flashlight, shine some light here, right there. These marks right here on the differential cover. The other side of the flex joint was hitting there. Flip this guy over. So on the bottom of this flex joint, see all this smashed up section right there, that's the part that was hitting against the differential. So it just didn't fit. It would either hit the differential or that lower coil spring mount, or I got it adjusted to where it was actually hitting both at the same time. That was the best I could do, is to get it to barely hit on both sides at the same time. But there's no way to get that to not hit without extending my bump stop on the driver's side, which I don't want to do because it's already extended right to where I want it. So unfortunately, this thing's going to have to go. It's the track bar, you know, it's great strength wise, it's plenty strong, it's easy to adjust. It's made out of a strong material, and the bends in the bar are nice such that the bar clears the front differential. I never had an issue with this part of the bar coming in contact with the differential. It's just this huge joint on the end, and if you get a Curry track bar, it basically uses the same style joint. A Curry Johnny joint is very similar to this flex joint. I don't know if they're identical. This material inside might be slightly different, but when you look at the two joints side by side, they look almost identical. One difference I have seen with the Curry track bar is this grease nipple, instead of sticking off to the side like this, the ones that I've seen on the Curry bar, the grease nipple is on the front side sticking out this way, so you wouldn't run into that issue with the grease nipple hitting that coil bucket and getting broken off. This Metalcloak bar is solid chromoly, so it should also be plenty strong. And the way the bends are a little bit different. It looks like the JKS bar actually has a higher bend in the middle to be able to clear over the front of the differential. But again, I never had clearance issues there. The clearance issues were all because of this joint. So I'm going to get this Metalcloak one bolted in place and get the length adjusted, and then we'll see how much clearance there is with this new joint. Alright, here's a few tips for when you're installing this Metalcloak track bar. On the axle side, this hole right here needs to be enlarged. The hardware that comes with the Metalcloak bar, it's larger hardware than the stock hardware, and it's larger than the JKS. This needs to be drilled out to, I believe it was a 9/16 size hole. So this bolt will go through there, and yeah, through both sides there. So through this hole and through that hole. So you need to drill out both sides of that, and then it comes with a flag nut. It goes up inside of here to reach on the back side of that bolt, kind of like how it does from the factory. But this flag nut, I just discovered there's a little trick with it to actually getting it to line up with the bolt. At first I thought it wasn't going to work and I was going to have to modify the flag nut. But here's what it looks like. When you put this flag nut up through this slot, normally the bottom part of the flag nut just hangs down through that hole and you can get it to line up, but it will not quite line up with the hole right. When you try to rotate it, it just won't quite rotate far enough to line up. So what I discovered is that you actually need to push that flag nut all the way up inside of there, sort of disappears in there, and then you slide the flag part of it over this direction inside of that bracket, and then you can get that nut to line up with the back of the bolt just fine. So if you run into that problem with this and you think you need to grind on the flag nut to get it to fit right, you could do it that way, but it looks like all you need to do is just push the whole flag nut up inside of here and then slide it over there. And then you can get that bolt to line up with the nut, and then you can get the axle side bolted up. And on the driver's side, same deal. The hardware is bigger than what comes with JKS. I believe the bolt that came with the JKS track bar was already bigger than the stock bolt, but the Metalcloak one is even larger than that. I think it's a 5/8, if I remember correctly when I measured. I don't know, but anyway, you'll need to drill out the frame mount side to fit this larger hardware through there. Once you drill that out, you can get that guy through. So that's just something you'll have to prepare for. You'll need some larger drill bits to drill both ends of that before you install this track bar. Alright, I'm going to get back to bolting it on. Okay, the track bar is installed. Everything is torqued down. Drilled out this side with that bigger bolt is in there. And the Heim joint's got way more clearance now between this front differential and this lower spring seat. I'm hoping this will solve my issue with the track bar hitting stuff. It looks like there's going to be plenty of clearance now. I'll have to take it out, flex the suspension out all the way, make sure it's not going to hit. Here's a shot from underneath. The Heim joint is way smaller than that JKS flex joint, so there should be no more issue with it hitting here or here. And there's plenty of space between the front differential and the track bar right here in this area, so that shouldn't be an issue at all. Yeah, that end's torqued down and the length is adjusted so that my axle is now centered under the Jeep. And if you're ever trying to center it, it's the easiest way to tell is look how your bump stops are lining up. Upper part of your bump stop, you want that to be centered right over the lower part of your bump stop. So when your suspension compresses, those two line up. Make sure that's centered on both sides. And yeah, then your axle's centered. Nice new track bar, everything's torqued down. Should be good to go for a while until I take it out and bend something else on it. Alright, thanks for watching.